Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting in approximately 2 minutes. Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Association for Court Management's webinar, sponsored and hosted by Tyler Technologies, Courts After COVID-19, Preparing for a Post-Pandemic Reality. My name is Charleston Carter, and I'm introducing our host, Sandy Peters, today. I am the trial court administrator for the Superior Court of North Carolina, 26th Judicial District in Mecklenburg County, and I serve on NACOM's Board of Directors. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. This presentation will be approximately 60 minutes long, and we are recording today's webinar. The recording will be available for members on NACOM's website. If you are joining the webinar today on your computer, you can submit questions to today's presenter throughout the presentation by typing your questions into the questions pane of the attendees control panel. Mr. Peters will address your questions during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Additionally, if you're on Twitter, you can use hashtag #CourtsAfterCovid to join the conversation with your peers. Hundreds of courts from around the country are represented on this call. We encourage you to use the hashtag to connect with them about ideas about the presentation that may spark some sort of interest in best practices that you have learned or are interested in learning more about. Court technology expert Sandy Peters will present how your court can meet the new expectations for virtual access to justice and continue to offer distant court services. Sandy Peters is the Vice President and General Manager of Tyler Technologies Encode product line. He joined Tyler Technologies in 1998 as Vice President of Software Development. He began his current role in 2017 and received a BBA in Management Information System from Texas Tech University. Thank you for hosting us today, Mr. Peters.
Thanks, Charleston. You know, as I think about it, certain events in history cause us to realize that things will never be the same again. An event like that comes to mind for me is 9/11. I'm not sure how many of you remember 9/11, probably a significant number of you, but as it unfolded during the day that it was going on and the weeks afterwards, you just had this feeling that things were going to change forever. Really not sure what or how, but you just knew things were going to change. I remember traveling before 9/11, and I often did this. I'm ashamed to say I could arrive at the airport about 15 minutes before my flight was going to be boarding, and I could breeze through security regardless of what I was carrying with me and make it to my gate in plenty of time and board the plane. And those days are gone forever. And so 9/11 certainly changed that. So as we process through COVID and the pandemic, don't we sort of get the same sense that things are going to change in our world? Many things will probably never go back to the way they were. We're not sure exactly how or what, but we all have this sense that a new normal is coming. So as Charleston said, I'm Sandy Peters, Vice President and GM for the Encode Court product line at Tyler Technologies. And thank you for joining me today as we sort of explore some ideas about preparing for a post-pandemic world. I've been with Tyler for almost 20 years, and I've been in technology my whole career, which is now close to 40 years. Hard to say that out loud. I'm not here to give you an exhaustive list by any means of what you're going to need to do in a post-pandemic world, but we only have an hour, and I'm not that smart. But I would like to focus on a few things that I think technology can help with as we start to think about moving into the future, into a world that is really still pretty uncertain. One thing that we can all agree on, I believe, is COVID has forced us to rethink the way we operate courts. Not really great to admit for some of us, but the reality is many courts were not prepared to handle a crisis like COVID. As we've talked to our clients, we hear that courts have had to close completely or significantly scale back. Certain courts have just had to issue extensions because they just were not, there was no way for defendants to see the judge. Many courts didn't have an easy way for defendants to pay online or potentially sign up for programs. Staff couldn't access the court software from home. In municipal court, for instance, we've seen that many of them are seeing 30 to 50% fewer citations being issued during the current pandemic. So one thing's for sure, all of these and more add up to a major disruption to the business of court. What's interesting is 9/11 uncovered an underlying crisis in our airport security system. Honestly, the problem was there. 9/11 just exploited it and brought it to light. So did the pandemic uncover an underlying crisis in our court system? Did it shine a light on underlying problems that have been there for some time? Are we in the court system prepared to face those problems and truly begin to do something about them? Over the last several years, we've slowly begun to think about using technology to make things more convenient in our court. But COVID has introduced a whole new aspect for us to think about. And that's what I call responsibility. While we can provide more convenient access to justice, now we realize that we really have some new responsibilities. And maybe they've been there all along, but we just didn't realize it or accept them. And the question is, can technology play a part in that? And what does it look like to be more responsible? Well, I think first of all, we have a responsibility to the staff. We need to ensure their safety as we think about things like the COVID pandemic. You know, as our company began to respond to the pandemic, I thought a lot about the responsibility to our staff. You know, I always thought I chose technology as a field because really I didn't have to worry about people's personal safety in that industry, but that's just not true anymore. How would you feel if one of your employees was exposed to COVID, then exposed others in their family, and someone potentially passed away? I know it's something that I think about, and it's a new responsibility that we're going to all have to take very seriously. Safety to your staff is going to need to be one of your main priorities. In addition to staff, we have a responsibility to the people that are coming to the court. We can't ignore that our outdated thinking has now put the health of defendants at risk. So we have a new responsibility. We have to find ways to help them resolve their case during a crisis such as COVID. Also, how many people have not resolved their case because it's just not convenient to come to the court, or maybe they're a little intimidated by coming to the court? You know, they have to take off work, they have to find childcare, travel to the court, find parking, wait in lines, wait in court. It's really not very convenient, and in many cases it can be intimidating. So we have a responsibility to our staff. We have a responsibility to defendants to keep them all safe. And we need to figure out more convenient methods for people to resolve their case. But there's something else that we really can't ignore in all of this, and we have to ensure the security of the data and our solutions. You know, this is really not new to a post-pandemic environment. It continues to have huge implications in keeping our courts operating, though. You know, last year, over 200,000 organizations reported ransomware attacks. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of ransomware. I'm sure there are many of you that may have experienced one in the last few months. Basically, your data is taken hostage and a ransom is demanded. Over 200,000 organizations last year. That's over a 41% increase from the year before. And honestly, it just continues to increase exponentially month to month. In those ransomware attacks, the average payment to release files spiked to over $80,000 in the last quarter of 2019, more than double what it was the previous quarter. That figure jumped to almost $200,000 in the last month of 2019, with several organizations facing ransomware demands in the millions of dollars. You know, that cost doesn't even take into account the other expenses. Even if your organization was prepared with good backups of your data, there's loss from downtime and interruption to your court as you rebuild lost data, and many other aspects that can cost a court. Security, there's no question, is becoming a bigger and bigger and more expensive issue every day. So as we kind of process through our world today, we continue to hear I'm ready for everything to return back to normal. I'm just so over COVID. We all hear it. I really wonder to myself, will we really? Can things return to the way they were before COVID? Can we depend on that? You know, we've learned so much over the last few months, and honestly, a crisis should teach us things about the way we do business. Just like 9/11, shouldn't we begin preparing for the new normal and be more prepared for the next crisis? Because there's no doubt there will be another crisis. So this is our challenge. We need to provide convenient, responsible, secure methods to keep our courts operating and providing consistent and equal access to justice. So can we use this new challenge to help us rethink the way we operate courts? Now more than ever, it's going to be imperative for us to focus on resolving as many cases as possible. And here's a question: are courts in the customer service business? Should they be? Do we care if our solutions add convenience to the court processes? Again, did the pandemic just uncover the fact that we've not been providing equal access to justice? So I believe COVID uncovered some issues in our court system. To prepare for the future post-pandemic, even though we don't know exactly what that looks like, I believe there's some things that we can go ahead and start doing now. We need to provide more convenient ways for defendants to resolve their cases. We need to recognize the responsibility we have to defendants and to our staff to keep them safe. We need to do everything we can to keep courts operating during crisis. Whether it's COVID or hurricanes or ransomware, crises come to us in all forms and fashions. And then we have to do all of that with an emphasis on security. Well, I've been in the technology industry now for a long, long time, and I think technology is uniquely positioned to help us solve many of these challenges, if not all of them. You know, people are more and more comfortable with technology every day. Studies show that over 96% of people in the US own a cell phone, and 81% of those are smartphones. Technology is available. Have we been using it to help us truly give better access to justice? Let's explore that. Let's start with the basics, kind of the foundation of what it takes, if you will. Cloud-based solutions can play a big role in solving some of these challenges. These are solutions that don't just run in the cloud, but were built from the ground up to take advantage of what cloud-based offerings can do. So let's look for a minute at some of those advantages. First of all, cloud-based applications are much easier to update. There's no need to go around and touch multiple workstations. Often, on-premise solutions are updated in really large monolithic releases containing hundreds of new features or changes. Cloud-based solutions, on the other hand, can be released in small increments. No downtime to install those new releases. And since those new features are released in smaller increments, the training costs are greatly reduced. Many times, no training at all is required, as small changes are made into a cloud-based system. On-premise solutions may require days, weeks, or months to expand storage and processing, many times involving purchasing new hardware. With cloud-based solutions, processing and storage needs can be expanded easily and quickly as needed. It's a shared resource that allows you to use what you need when you need it. The investment in the latest security measures for cloud-based offerings can be leveraged across millions and millions of users. There's no question that continuing to meet the needs of the security issues that we see each day are becoming more and more expensive, and sometimes almost impossible to invest in at an individual organization level. With cloud-based offerings, that investment is made across the entire user base. And one thing's for sure, the security needs are constantly changing. So again, the investment in protecting data can be also leveraged across a large customer base. For instance, data can be stored in multiple locations, which can allow you to automatically flip, if you will, to a different location if a connection to one of those locations goes down. That data can also be backed up multiple times per day, maybe even multiple times per hour. All of these help ensure that the business is going to be able to continue, and that's something that we all see the need for in today's world. In addition, cloud-based solutions have proven to be much easier to connect between multiple departments and jurisdictions. You know, those departments may be across town or jurisdictions may be across the world. But as long as they're cloud connected, it makes it much, much easier for us to connect to them. And cloud-based solutions also make it easier and faster to provide citizen-facing solutions that help us add the convenience that we need for defendants. Things like apps and portals and online payment engines all become much, much easier when we have cloud-based solutions. You know, for us at Tyler, our cloud-based solutions, we partnered with Amazon Web Services. AWS is the global leader for cloud infrastructure, and they employ data centers globally to ensure the business continuity that we talked about. In addition, they set the standard for security and monitoring. The investments they make is leveraged again across millions and millions of users. AWS is also built for government compliance. They offer AWS GovCloud to support solutions that comply with the FedRAMP high baseline standards. We at Tyler recognize the benefits that AWS brings to the table as we continue to bring cloud-based solutions to the market. So cloud-based solutions are the building blocks or the foundation, if you will. You know, as we think about the solutions that are needed, can we do our best to replicate or possibly improve a defendant's in-person experience? Well, let's explore that. What are some of the features that we think you need to be thinking about? Well, can we provide holistic solutions? And what do I mean by holistic solutions? All encompassing. So we want to make sure that it's easy to notify the defendant about their case with maybe text messaging and email notifications. We want to make sure that our solutions provide options for good decision making, helps the defendant be more informed as they decide what they're going to do. We want to provide easy access for online payments and for signing up for programs. We want to make sure that we support secure document exchange and digital signatures. To me, an effective solution should provide all of these if you want to be convenient, responsible, and efficient. Well, let's explore one of the solutions, online dispute resolution, or ODR. ODR was developed to help resolve disputes through automation with limited human intervention for companies like eBay and PayPal. You can imagine the millions and millions of transactions that happen through those type of payments processors. And many times there is a dispute. And so their goal was, how do we create a way that those disputes can be resolved with the least amount of human intervention possible? Over the last several years, that technology has made its way into the court system. So let's use civil cases as an example. Just looking at a typical timeline. So the case gets filed, and then an answer gets filed and a hearing is set. Now that part of the process happens fairly quickly, but then the waiting starts. And many times the waiting can be 120 days before a hearing is held. And once the hearing is held, then the case can progress to a final resolution, leading to a final order. So ODR can help that significantly to reduce the time to resolution. After the hearing is set, the parties can begin negotiating online with an online tool that records the conversations that are going back and forth. Think of really an email conversation that's going back and forth between two parties, but is being facilitated in a tool that can keep up with those conversations and alert each party that somebody has responded. So that process can begin as soon as the hearing date is set, and those parties can begin a negotiation process. That tool can also support third-party mediation. So if the parties can't come to an agreement, a mediator can be assigned, and the mediator can then participate in the process as the information is going back and forth and try to help come to a resolution. And if that process works, either with or without a mediator, those parties can potentially come to a settlement. And that actually can bring that case to a resolution, many times cutting the time in half or more that it takes to get these civil cases resolved. Responsibly, conveniently, all while adding efficiency to the court system. So as COVID unfolded, the idea of virtual meetings was being discussed like never before. The use of online meeting tools skyrocketed so fast that many of the vendors had a really hard time keeping up with the demand and adding enough infrastructure. So the question quickly became, could we use online meeting tools to facilitate virtual hearings? Some states made online meeting tools available to courts to use at no cost. Even though these discussions started in earnest in relation to the challenge of COVID, a question arises. Do virtual hearings have a place in our justice system long after COVID is over? Can we use effective virtual hearings to add a level of convenience? Do you have defendants who fail to appear because they're intimidated by going to the court in person, or it simply is just inconvenient to get there? Another question is, do these quote unquote free tools really offer the solutions needed in the court system? You know, years ago, I heard a phrase that has stuck with me, and that is, if it doesn't work, free is too expensive. So why would a free solution be expensive? You know, the expense of a solution itself is really only part of the cost. There are hidden costs, such as training and implementation, not to mention inefficiencies that the solution can introduce into your processes, which cost time and money. So again, I ask, if it doesn't work, is free too expensive? So let's talk about virtual hearings using free tools for a minute. Not too long after COVID really hit the United States and we all went into lockdown mode, I watched a virtual hearing where the court was using a well-known free virtual meeting tool to try to provide better access to justice. As I watched that process, I picked up on a few things. One was they had a hard time managing the waiting room. All right, we just brought in the next defendant. Are you Mr. Jones? No, I'm not Mr. Jones. Okay, let us put you back in the waiting room. We need to talk to Mr. Jones. And so just trying to manage that process was unwieldy. Once they got the right person out of the waiting room, they went through a little bit of an explanation of saying, okay, let's talk about how this is going to work today, and explaining the way the process was going to go, and sometimes just sort of basic courtroom rules. Now that we've got to that point, let's start talking about what your options are for your case. And they laid out those options, and the defendant decided he wanted to set up a payment plan. All right, so as the judge was walking him through that process, he said, we need to verify your email address and phone number. So the defendant began to tell the judge his email address on the online video that has an ability for other people to be watching live. So the judge interrupted him very quickly in the middle of that and said, you may not want to give out your email address right now. Other people are watching that video, and you may not really want to have your email address out in the public. So we have a phone number here we think is good. We'll call you and verify your email address so that we can send you the paperwork that you need. So, and when you get that paperwork, you'll need to sign that, and then you'll need to come down to the court, sign your with your signed documents, and or we can provide a copy when you get here, and make your first payment. And you have 60 days to get that done. I must admit, I didn't come away from that thinking we had really used technology to solve a lot of the problems that we're faced with in the process of a virtual hearing. Again, just to recap, the waiting room was really hard to manage. It was hard to ensure which defendant was being brought into the hearing. There's really no secure way to verify and pass information back and forth, such as verifying their address and their email address, phone numbers, etc. There wasn't a secure way to pass documents back and forth. You know, the statement was, you'll need to come down to the court to sign the document. That doesn't feel very efficient to me. Doesn't feel very responsible in today's time. And then they really didn't have a great way to send people to a website to pay. You either need to come down to the court and make a payment on your payment plan, or you can go to mycityname.tx.us/municipal court, scroll down, read through all of the different things, click on this, click on that, and you'll get to a link that says pay here. Again, really doesn't feel very efficient and effective. And the bottom line is, it really just was not built for the court process. This was a tool that was designed and has been used for years for online meetings. There's a lot of problems with that when we try to make that work in the court system. So obviously, I think there's a better way to improve this process. I think your case management system should determine who is eligible for a virtual hearing, and that can be done automatically based on a set of your court rules. Since it's automatically figured out who's eligible, that allows the defendant to sign up online, or the court staff can assign a case to a virtual court session. You want something that actually provides a secure link for each defendant, a separate link for each defendant that are all going into potentially the same court session, but it allows you to identify each defendant and be confident when you bring them into the hearing that you're bringing in the right person. And then obviously you want to make sure that you can very easily send text messages and emails to remind them about their particular court session. You want to provide the defendant with basic information when they arrive in the waiting room. your court rules, etc. In the hearing I watched, this was handled verbally, which wastes valuable time. Why not have a form and or a video that's available to the defendant while they're in the waiting room? You want to easily manage the waiting room and send defendants to different rooms depending on your process. Say, for instance, something that we see in some of the municipal courts is you want them to first go into a room and talk to the prosecutor. After talking to the prosecutor, they may go back into a waiting room, and then they're available to be brought into a hearing to go before the judge. After they talk to the judge, you may want to send them back to the waiting room until you can verify that they've actually gone to the online link and done what they were expected to do, or sent in some document. You'll want to show the defendant information on their case, information that's not visible to others that are actually watching the hearing. And then you want to give, that gives you the opportunity to then verify personal information without disclosing it to whoever may be watching that particular hearing. I think it's important also to provide a secure chat feature to allow them to update and or pass information, which again will not be visible to others. As the case changes, or changes are made in your CMS system, that information should be updated on the screen for the defendant to verify that, yes, that's really what I want to do. I want to sign up for a payment plan, and so you can have them verify that. You want to provide a secure way for documents to be passed back and forth to allow the defendant to upload documents like a copy of their driver's license. This will also allow you to send documents to the defendant and allow them to sign digitally and send it back to the court. The defendant's session can remain active even after they've seen the judge while they accomplish document signing and uploading, but the court staff can move on to the next defendant. And as I've said, you want to make sure that you provide a way for them to pay online at the end. What you want is a tool built to handle the court's process the way the court needs it. See the defendant, allow them to choose, update the case, exchange documents, then send them to a payment portal. The case is resolved. Convenient, responsible, secure, and efficient. Richard Susskind made this statement at the CTC conference in 2019. In the year 2030, by default, cases will be conducted online unless there's a compelling reason to assemble in a courtroom. Maybe you agree with that, or maybe you don't. Honestly, I believe solutions like we discussed today are more than just COVID solutions, although COVID has brought the need for those solutions to light. They truly are a way of the future. So my question is, are you prepared to provide these convenient, responsible, secure, and equal access to justice solutions? Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. And one last thing, and then we can take questions. We at Tyler do have solutions available now. We would love to discuss those with you. You can go to the link that you see at the top of the screen to find out more or set up a time for a discussion. I'll leave that link up while we take questions in a moment. We do have virtual court. It was a concept that was born through conversations with our clients long before COVID. We released it during the COVID pandemic, and it continues to evolve. Currently, we offer Tyler Virtual Court for high volume traffic cases in municipal and county courts. We've seen courts that have been able to completely clear their backlog of cases while using Tyler Virtual Court, even during the COVID pandemic. We also offer online dispute resolution. ODR is helping courts keep cases for small claims, parenting plans, evictions, and more moving forward without face-to-face interaction. We have a whole set of what we call case resolution tools that include online payments, text notifications, interactive voice response systems, and much more. And as I said, we partner with AWS to provide the highest level of security for our courts and the communities that we serve using AWS. So at this point, I'll move into a time and answer questions if those questions are out there.
Mr. Peters, you may have already covered, this is Charleston Carter. One question that was asked, what do you say to organizations that don't have many resources and have very limited budgets?
Well, certainly understand that that's an issue. That's an issue that we're seeing in the courts that are our clients as well. And we've tried to do some things to help with that as much as we possibly can, and really trying to encourage courts to reach out and try to find. There seems to be money available through the CARES Act for different technology-related items with courts, and so we'd certainly encourage you to look at those resources.
I don't see any other questions, Mr. Peters. I want to thank you so much for hosting this webinar. And I would like to thank you, to those who participate in the webinar this afternoon. I also want to take the opportunity to share a few announcements. The NAICS Court Leaders Advantage video podcast, The Systemic Bias of the Courts, will be released on Thursday, August the 20th. The podcast features a panel discussion on state of courts regarding systemic bias, and they can be located on NAICM's website, nacmnet.org, and go up on the podcast and you can find it. The other announcement is that for non-NAICM members who are participating in today's webinar, we encourage you to consider membership. NAICM is the largest organization of court management professionals in the world. In addition to providing quality education at conferences and webinars, publications and guides and other material, NAICM also teaches how to go about and executing best practices with other court professionals. All of this information and more can be found on nacmnet.org. That's nacmnet.org. Also, information can be found about Tyler Technologies at tylertech.com. That's Tyler, Tyler, Tech, TECH.com. A recording of today's webinar will be available on NAICM's website via the member portal. On behalf of the NAICM Association, the National Association for Court Management and Tyler Technologies, we thank you for joining us today and have a superior day. Thank you all.